Rich is having his own little dance party.
I noticed that.
Right?
Yeah, I am.
Where should I be moving? And I'll go with you.
We got to get you all more like pre-session music so people can just like be jamming instead of just staring awkwardly at each other. Like,
Right.
are you gonna say something first? No, no. Okay, I'll just be silent here. Because Dennis is there dancing in his own place. He actually has a bunch of songs that he likes to dance to, and I'm surprised he's not on, because if he was, you could see a whole slew of songs and costumes and everything. I'm just amazed that he hasn't jumped on yet.
I know, so he's holding out on us?
Yeah, he's totally. I mean, Dennis, why aren't we doing this? I don't understand, because you know what I have here. Alexa, pause. Oh, please, Dennis, tell me you're paying attention, because this is about to happen. Because you can get this. Oh wait, no, choose another video. Okay, hold on. It's gonna be so good. Dennis, you're not on yet. This is gonna happen. We got the Dennis fan club. This is all the dances that Dennis likes to dance to and put online. And so here you go.
That is fantastic.
Yes. Be careful what you put out there, ladies and gentlemen, because you may have your own fan club, just like Dennis does. Act now, and for only a low price of $1.99 a month, you too can be a Dennis fan club member. You get your very own Camp to Come to pin, and one of these outfits will be coming to your door for a singing telegram.
That's awesome.
A man can't even go and get some water without being harassed. Man.
Come on, Dennis.
Pay to go get a glass of water.
I couldn't text you fast enough.
Ugh. Rich.
You're very welcome. I'm just spreading the love. Just spreading the love.
Anything for the children. Anything for the children's. Oh my gosh. I'm ribbon dancing in one of those with a towel.
Oh, Rich is pointing it out for us. There we go. There he is.
The campers have gotten a lot of use out of those images, that's for sure.
Dennis, can you please share with everyone the interview you did where someone said, showed up with one of the famous backgrounds we made for you that you never met?
Wait, what? Which one are we talking about? What are we talking about, Rich?
You told me that you did an interview once and they showed up with one of these Zoom backgrounds and you never met them.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that was a doctoral student who wanted to interview me, and yeah. And he had my background somehow, and I'd never met him before, and he was at Boston University, and it was a very funny thing.
Dennis fan club, ladies and gentlemen, Dennis fan club, reaching people that don't even know who Dennis is. You're welcome.
That's how you know you've made an impact.
Well, I auctioned off for our silent auction the ability to pick a song and dress me, and I would sing it and film myself and post it. And so one of those is me singing Whitney Houston in a unicorn onesie. I want to dance with someone. If you go to YouTube and look up Dennis Sings Badly, it comes up because it is posted for all to see as promised. And the children have gotten a lot of miles off of that.
With apologies to Whitney as well.
I did. I apologized to her all the way through it because it was that bad.
Rosemary, please tell me you have this background, right?
Yes, I actually have a couple of them. we get well supplied.
Yeah. One of my proud moments.
I was just looking at YouTube. There's one here for Dennis Sings Bad Leroy Brown, but that's not you. You, I assume. No.
I have not been asked to do that one, thankfully.
Well, welcome everyone. I'm Candy Lamar with Camp Quality, and I'm here tonight as your host just to introduce Dr. Rachel and welcome you guys. So thank you for taking time out of your evening to be with us tonight. I think this should be really fun and informative. We obviously got an energetic crowd with Rich and Dennis and others. So no doubt we will have fun tonight. So thank you again for joining us. I have a little bit of a bio to read about Rachel. So you'll know a little bit more about her. Dr. Rachel Gallardo was originally from Baton Rouge, Illinois, but has lived in and around Houston most of her life. She studied psychology from Louisiana State University and proceeded to receive her MBA and master's in industrial organizational psychology, which I want her to tell us more about what that's all about. So very interesting. And completed her PhD in IO psychology. Her primary focus is on leadership and research in the areas of personality, workplace behavior, and organizational development. After spending approximately 10 years in various human resource capacities in healthcare, Rachel made the career transition to higher education. She is currently the department chair for psychology and anthropology department at Blaine, sorry, maybe
It's
Rachel.
Lynn. It's
Lynn,
yeah.
okay, I really butchered that, college. So there you have it. That's Dr. Rachel, and I will turn it over to her. Thank you.
Well, hi, everybody. I'm really excited to be here. And I only want my students to give me a formal Dr. or Mrs. So for our purposes today, Rachel is totally fine. And basically, what in the world is IO psychology? Take all of the psychological principles that you maybe know about, all the theories, and apply it to the workplace environment, apply it to a business. So I am not Dr. Phil. If you've got issues with your siblings, I'm so sorry for you. But if you want to talk about, your job description and how that fits in with the overall company mission statement, then we can do that part of it. So I'm really excited to be here today. I was very honored whenever I found out about this opportunity, and I was actually shocked whenever it was accepted. So I'm hoping that tonight will kind of be lighthearted because I realize what time it is, but also really informative, something that you can take back to your niche of the world and hopefully make an impact. So hopefully technology will cooperate, and I will share my screen. All right. So everything that we're going to be talking about tonight, again, is kind of an opportunity for you to do a little bit of self-reflection. And I want for you to think about the people that are in your life. So who is it that you have to work with? Who are some of the volunteers that you interact with? Who are just, people in your family, maybe that you have to have these different interactions with, because I really believe that if we can kind of stop and take a moment to look at things from the paradigm of the person that we're interacting with, we can get a lot more value out of communication. So before we get too far into some of this, I want to ask just kind of a general question. What kind of conversation are these two individuals having? And feel free to drop this in the chat. What kind of dialogue do you think the two of them are discussing? If any of the extroverts want to shout out, that's fine too. So what kind of gel are they using? Maybe they are talking a little bit about tennis, the floats in the parade, possibly, but there's definitely an age gap here, right? So there's a very different perspective between the two of them. What about this conversation? Might be story time. Absolutely. Does anybody else have a 3 or 4-year-old that can pick up this device and work it better than you can? Because I know that I do. And I'm always amazed when I'm sitting there watching them do all of these different things. Their ability to really interact with technology and be comfortable with technology is just astonishing. And one more. So got two faculty members here talking in the teacher's lounge. You teach sex education. What does it mean if kids are blogging and twittering? So even the language of some of the technology and the transformations that we've had across our society, if you don't understand that language, you're going to kind of be lost in what's going on around you. Yes. So what I want to do is kind of break this down, because in the environment that we're in right now, we actually have 5 different people, well, generations, I should say, that are in the work environment. And I looked this up today to make sure I had my stats right. 2% of the people that are in the work environment are considered your more traditionalists. Now, I want to say ish whenever we're throwing out all of these dates. So it's not a cookie cutter thing. You know, somebody could be born during this time frame, but depending upon their childhood, they could be raised very differently. My point is to establish the main ideas, the main events that happened within society that really shaped people's perspective of the world. So if you stop and think about what was going on during this period, radios were the primary form of communication. We found out different pieces of information sitting around and kind of listening to those things on a Saturday night. This is also the generation that really had to deal with World War II and some of the tragedies that were going on with that item. The first time the United States had really been attacked. So their perspective on things was very different. You know, they only really had one source of communication, maybe a couple of other areas, but the traditionalists really had a lot that they had to deal with. If you look at the Great Depression and then both world wars, and that really shaped how they perceive the world. So whenever it comes to a workplace environment perspective, this generation is referred to as the quote unquote silent generation, which I personally hate, because there's so much information you can get from people within this generation. If you just take the time to listen to them, there's so much just valuable content that they can provide, life skills. But whenever we look at education, that was a total pipe dream. It wasn't something that everybody did. If you didn't come from the right stock, you were not going to go to college, you weren't going to get a degree. And the people within this generation typically have a very high respect for authority. If somebody tells you to do something, you do it. There's no, well, why? Well, how come? Or questioning in that regards. They're typically very respectful of authority. And if they have an issue, they will talk to that person, but they're not one to really blow it out. And they're certainly not going to put it out on social media and things of that nature, right? So whenever we look at this from an application standpoint, again, these individuals are typically very respectful of people that are in a position of authority. So if you have these individuals on their team, they're really looking to you to be a leader. They're really looking to you to provide some sort of guidance. But on the flip side of that, they are definitely going to take a lot of pride in their work. They're not going to call off. If they tell you they're going to be somewhere at a certain time, riding a horse and wearing the unicorn onesie, just put it on your calendar, because it's going to happen, right? They are fully committed. They're not going to hop from situation to situation. Once they commit to something, they are fully committed. And that's a beautiful thing. And as you see, as we progress through each of these different generations, that element of being fully committed tends to waver as we get into our younger generation. Okay. So moving right along, we have our baby boomers. And statistically speaking, about 25% of the work environment currently consists of baby boomers. So we're looking at the 1940s-ish to about the mid-1960s-ish. And I'm not going to ask for anybody to disclose what their age is. If somebody wants to self-disclose, that's fine. But whenever we look at this generation, there were a lot of key milestones that were occurring. And probably one of the biggest ones from a generational perspective is the family unit was very, very important. So the idea of the male goes out into the work environment, is the primary breadwinner. The woman stays home, takes care of the kids, dinner's on the table by 6, where, you know, everybody is washed and showered by 7:30, everybody in bed, lights out 8:30, 9 o'clock. So that core family unit was very, very strong during this time period. But there was also a lot of social turmoil that was going on around. So Martin Luther King was really starting to rise during this time. And then there were just a number of things in the late 50s and late 60s that were beginning to emerge as well. So whenever we take a look at our baby boomers, These individuals have a very high self-actualizing personality. So they really believe that it's up to me to go in and do the work, and I've got to be patient and I've got to stick with this, and eventually it's going to pay off in the long run. I had to include a picture of a Bel Air because that is my dream car, that if I win the lottery tomorrow, I'm buying a 55 Bel Air, but that's just me. But education is a birthright. These individuals are very, very confident in their tasks. Why? Because they have worked on them, they have modified them, they've perfected them, they've been doing it for years. So they typically don't need a lot of hand-holding because they've already been down that road, they've already walked that path, and they're very strong in that regards. Remember, your traditionalists were the ones that were raising many of your baby boomers. Yes. So the traditionalists told them, you have to work hard, you have to work hard, you have to work hard. And lo and behold, that's what the majority of individuals that are classified as baby boomers really self-identify as being. Okay. So whenever we take this into more of a work environment perspective, or even amongst our volunteers, these individuals are typically going to want the face-to-face meetings. These are your individuals, and I like to consider myself a little old school. They're going to have a pen and paper, and they're usually going to write things down. That's how they've always done it. It's always worked for them. You do have some that have transitioned into technology, and that is great. But it's comfortable, it's familiar to just write things down because I know where I can go and find it. Typically, this generation is also going to ask a lot of questions. They're going to want to understand why. They're going to want to make sure that they have all of the details that they need to have to be able to do the task, because they know they have the skills and abilities to do it. They just want to make sure that they're applying that experience in the best way possible. And typically these individuals can also provide a lot of value in that, well, 10 years ago we did X, Y, and Z. This is how that worked out. So if somebody is trying to implement a new program, implement a new idea, these individuals can be very helpful to say, well, did you stop and think about this? Because in the past we did this and it didn't work, and now you're trying to do this. Are you sure that that's what you want to do? Okay, so we got to keep all of these different dynamics in mind. So 2 down, 3 more to go, and then I'm going to give you an acronym to help you to be able to apply all of this information together. Okay, Generation X. So your Generation Xers are typically between the 1960s-ish and the early 1980s-ish. Again, I say ish because nothing is cookie cutter in nature. Couple of toys for those of you that grew up in that time frame, but also too, they were really defined by the Challenger explosion. So that was the first time that there was supposed to be a teacher that was going to go into the United States. Everybody gathered around the TV, and then boom, you've got this super tragic event that occurred. This is also whenever we had 3 Mile Island in Pennsylvania. So that was a nuclear explosion, one of the biggest ones to happen on US soil. So that was kind of a defining moment in the developmental stages of these individuals. Got a couple of Happy Days items, couple of the original Nintendos. This is when Star Wars came out, and it's amazing that something that came out so long ago still has such a cultural impact today. But all of these different things, the good and the bad, really shape the paradigm of which Generation X really views the world around them. So for those people that are Gen Xers, remember in the baby boomers, it was all about the family unit. Well, in Generation X, this is when we really started to see a spike in the divorce rates here in the United States. So many of these individuals, they were living with mom, dad may or may not have been in the picture depending upon the situation, but it was one of those situations where mom said, I'm going to be home at 6 o'clock. Here's your list. Your list needs to be done by the time I get home, or you're going to be in a lot of trouble. Right? They're known as latchkey kids. You came in from the bus, you shut and locked the door, you latched that sucker shut, and you didn't open it until whatever parental figure came in. So in having this sort of developmental items occurring over and over and over again within their childhood, they have become very independent minded. I was able to do these things. I took care of my list. I was 13 years old doing a list. I don't need somebody hovering over me. One of the worst things that you could possibly do for somebody that is a Gen Xer is to micromanage them, okay? And education is seen as a way to get where I want to be. So whereas the previous generations, it was more or less a birthright, it was a privilege, Generation X was the first one to really say, you know what, if I go get an education, I can be whatever it is that they're striving to be, Okay, and here's the first car phone that was ever invented, the first Mac computer, just in case anybody wants to take a stroll down memory lane. So how does this apply to us? If you're working with on a project with somebody that is heavily shaped by the Generation X mentality, they want to know, what is the point? So it's not necessarily a why are we doing this, but it's a what is the point of us doing this? What is the long-term gain? What is the long-term purpose of what it is that you're asking me to do? And once you tell me what it is that we're doing and you tell me what your expectations on, leave me alone. Don't hover over me. Don't keep following up with me. Don't continue to don't micromanage me. If I get stuck, I will come and talk to you about it. But I don't need you asking me 5 times about the same exact question whenever I told you that I was going to take care of it. Okay. So this was really the first generation that was really had a spike from an independence perspective. And that's because they had to be independent as children. Okay. So there's 3. We've got 2 more. Generation Y, also known as the millennials. So these individuals are early 1980s-ish to about the mid 90s-ish. The people that are in high school, those are no longer millennials. Your average millennial is actually in their early to mid 30s. So just something to keep in mind whenever we're looking at some of this from a math perspective. And there's still some of that overlap from a Generation X to Generation Y, because there's a number of these items that were still around once the millennial generation was born and once they started reaching their developmental years. The key thing, though, is that most of your millennials are defined by the tragedy of 9/11. So for most millennials, you can ask them, where were you on 9/11? They're going to be able to tell you where they were, what they were doing. Many of them were either in middle school, high school, or college, early college. And they remember how the country was shaped and what the country was thrown into whenever this occurred. This was also one of the first instances as well, whenever in their developmental years, there was a Columbine shooting. And that was the first time that it was no longer safe for children to be able to be in school, because bad things still happened at school. In previous generations, yes, there was bullying and there were some bad things that happened as well, but not to the extent of Columbine. Okay. So when we take a look at all of this, Generation Y was really the first generation to have this idea of blended families. So the baby boomers, all of the family unit was together. We all lived together. We grew up together until the kids left and started their own life. Generation X is more of the latchkey kid, very independent situation going on from a developmental standpoint. But Generation Y, you've got not only mom, but now you've got a stepfather, and then you have step siblings. And then if those marriages don't work out, the step siblings go away along with the step parent, and then maybe new step people are involved. So it really and truly is a blended family. And this generation was the first one to really experience that on a very different level than the previous generations before. Generation Y is typically very confident. They're associated with, I just want to have a good time and I want to hang out with my friends. Now they're still responsible, but they like that social interaction component that comes with having that millennial mindset. So a lot of the technology that we started to use, they're considered your digital pioneers. So everybody remember whenever MySpace came out? That was like the big thing, and everybody was going to use MySpace. And then little by little, we gravitated over to Facebook, and now there's Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, Twitter, all these other different things. But they were the first ones to really use the internet, use email, and the first ones to have the ability to take pictures with their phones. And to a millennial, getting an education is just very expensive. Why do I need to spend all of that money to go learn this trade? Why do I need to spend all of this money to have a piece of paper to go and do this thing? So they're very hesitant to go into any educational commitments because they see how expensive it is. Again, a lot of them are in their, let's just say, early to mid 30s. They don't want to take on all that debt. As of right now, they probably have children of their own, and then they also have aging parents. So they're starting to join Generation X with having, it's called that sandwich generation, where you not only have younger children that you're taking care of, but you have older parents that you're taking care of as well. So Gen X and Gen Y are kind of feeling the pressure from both sides. All right. So saying all of that, when you're collaborating with a Gen Y or a millennial, they're really worried about how quickly can we get this done? Like, what's the fastest way that we can communicate this information? So where a Gen Xer might want to pick up the phone, a Gen Yer would just text it to me. Just text me what I need to know and we'll go from there. I don't need to have a big, long, drawn out meeting. They want to do it the quickest possible way because they're highly aware of time. They know that there's not a lot of time. They know that there's, they've got that sandwich generational thing that's going on. And I don't have time to also work and, drive my kid to soccer and also take care of my mom. And then I got my husband over here too. So they really are pulled in a lot of different directions. And so they want to get things done as quickly as possible. Okay. 4 down, 1 more to go. And last but not least, we have Generation Z. So your Generation Z, these are your individuals that are typically born your mid to late 90s up until about 10 years ago. This generation they don't remember Columbine. They don't remember 9/11. Whenever I give this example in my class, when I talk about memory in my psychology courses, I can't use the example of 9/11 anymore because my students weren't born during that time. I can't even use Toy Story as an example because many of them weren't born at that time and had never seen the movie. So they have a very different perspective of the world because they've had a lot of new things that have happened to them. So from a weather perspective, Hurricane Katrina was a major defining moment for many people within Generation Z. This is the first time we had an African American that was elected as president of the United States. So that really opened a lot of doors and made people see, well, you know what, I'm capable of whatever it is that I want to accomplish. This is kind of your typical image that you see a lot of people with Generation Z. And in their minds, they're being very social. They may not be talking to each other, but they're reaching out and making contacts with people all over the world. And this is also the generation that was able to see marijuana legalized for the first time in the United States as well. So a lot of firsts going on that can really shape the developmental processes of people that are born during this time. Generation Z, one of the biggest things that they highlight is they want that transparency. They can tell if something is fake. They've got 15 filters on their phone with Instagram and Snapchat. Like they can tell if somebody's not being real, but they want that honesty. They want that transparency. And they're going to think a lot more globally about issues because they have the ability to interact with people all over the world. So diversity, equity, and inclusion is a huge driving force for people in Generation Z. And they want to have that interaction, but they want to use the technology for a lot of that interaction. So where your millennial generation was the first one to use it, Generation Z is the first one to really exploit it. And you've got these people that are influencers, and they're making millions of dollars just by posting videos on YouTube. They're able to take the technology and really and truly use it to their advantage for whatever story, whatever paradigm it is that they're trying to sell. Right? So why do I tell you all of this? And again, we already mentioned all of that. Why do I tell you all of this? Why do I kind of lay that foundation? Because you, wherever you're at in your world, and I really and truly believe that no matter what title somebody has, you're a leader. You have the ability to lead and shape and influence other people. And I know that there are official leaders that are here, but even if you don't feel like you have that official title, we all have the ability to influence. So now that we've kind of laid the groundwork for what all of these 5 generations, how they perceive the world, how they perceive the world around them, how they approach whatever commitment it is that they're drawn to, I'm going to give you an acronym, and it's ACORN. And whenever you're having to communicate or engage with or work on a project with people that are from multiple generations, I want for you to stop and think of this particular acronym. And we're going to go through these here in a little bit more detail, okay? So hopefully this gives you some things to keep in mind, so that way you can make sure that all 5 generations that are on your team remain engaged. So let's dive in. So the A in ACORN stands for accommodate. Now, I know that this can be somewhat challenging because we do have to make sure that we're staying consistent from a leadership perspective. I don't want for anybody to not be their true selves. You know, you don't want to give favoritism and discrimination. Like, we don't want to walk down that road at all. But we do need to understand that people have different learning styles and they have different ways that they prefer to communicate. So one question that you could ask somebody outright is, how do you prefer to communicate? I've got people on my team, we have a standing meeting every single week. It's only 30 minutes, but they want to have that face-to-face dialogue. And then I have other people that are like, just email me when you need me. I'm good. I don't need for you to tell me anything. And then there are other people that are like, just put it in a video. I'm just going to watch the video, because I send out a monthly video to the people on my team. Watch the video, don't watch the video, it's up to you. But I do different methods of communication because I'm trying to make sure that I capture how everybody likes to receive information. Okay. The C in ACORN is create choices. So when we're looking at how we're going to implement a particular idea, how we're going to implement a particular project, you always want to make sure that all of that goes back to your core mission, which for everybody on this call, core mission is to provide good quality care and, you know, positive experience for children that are going through things that I can't even begin to imagine. And just as a side note, I do want to say thank you guys for doing that. That's truly remarkable that you guys do this. But make sure that any change that you're looking to implement, any new ideas, any new project, anything new that you're trying to implement with your team, it aligns with the mission. You explain the why. You make those connections so that way there's, without a question, without a shadow of a doubt, what it is you're doing and why you're doing it. And everything should center around that primary mission. Because if you've got people that are working with you that are volunteering to also help with camp quality, they all have that core mission. And if you can relate whatever it is that you're trying to do back to the core mission, then you're going to get a lot more buy-in that way. Also, too, we want to make sure that we keep it lighthearted, keep it friendly, keep it humorous. I love the fact that, you know, dancing around in a dinosaur onesie. I mean, that's hilarious. You know, that's unforgettable. It's memorable. And it's something that no matter what age you are, you can find some humor in it, right? I'm a little too introverted myself to ever have the courage to do that. So Dennis, I definitely applaud you for it. But it's an element of humor. It's an element of playfulness. We're all human beings. We need to laugh. And the dopamine drop that comes with a good laugh is something that can't be replaced. Okay. Our O in ACORN, operate with sophistication. So when we're talking about your leadership style, it's very important for you to consider the person it is that you're leading. So while you have to look at your team as a whole, you've also got to make sure that you know the individual as well. Again, like I said before, there are some people I have that standing, you know, one-on-one meeting with, and there are some people that we talk once a month and they're fine with that and I'm fine with that because we don't need to communicate anymore. It's important for you as a leader to know when to make exceptions. So there are serious situations where I don't care if you don't want to be a part of this meeting, everybody needs to come together, we've got to talk about it. But at the same time, if it's not detrimental to the mission and we can still move forward without having to do that, then I have to make sure that I'm making exceptions in that manner as well. You always want to make sure that you're staying fair. You always want to make sure that you're being consistent and competent. And communication is hard. I mean, effective, really good, truly good communication is very, very difficult. And you might think, well, I already told them that. Okay, but maybe you said it this way and it was received by these people in this manner. But maybe if you say the exact same message, but you say it this way, the information will be relayed to everybody else. And that way we can all be on the same page. So it does require a little extra work. It does require a little extra thought, but that's where the idea of operating with sophistication really kicks in. Okay. 2 more. The R in our ACORN, respectful. And you would think that this would be a common sense item, but there are a lot of people that maybe are not as good in this area as they should be. You always want to make sure that you're assuming the best out of people. Don't just dismiss them because, oh, there goes that millennial again playing around on their phone. you don't really know what it is that they're looking at. You don't know what they could be doing. They might be adding something to their phone. They might be taking notes on their phone. They're not out on Instagram. They're actually taking notes. They're engaged with what's going on. So we want to try to make sure that we're assuming the best out of people and not labeling them with certain stereotypes that especially the media likes to put on each generation. And we want to try to find and recruit and hire and have people volunteer that are the best fit for a particular position. One of the hardest things it can be is to let go of a particular task because the individual isn't doing it the way that you think that they should do it. But at the end of the day, again, as long as everything aligns with that mission statement and we're moving forward, we're making progress, we're moving in the right direction, then that's the direction that we should be going in. Find a person's potential, find their gifts, find their abilities, and then exploit the heck out of it. Cool, you are really comfortable with social media. Here's the login information for this, and this. Here's our Canva information. Here's, buffer so you can automatically post. You love doing that? Awesome. As long as everything is moving towards the mission and we're all doing what it is that we need to do to be able to take care of the children, then that's what's most important. Okay. And then finally, we do want to make sure that we're nourishing retention. One of the areas that I focus on primarily is in compassion fatigue and burnout, and it's a very real thing. I did my study primarily in healthcare, but you guys are in a really challenging situation in that one day the child could be here and then the very next they take a turn for the worst, and then there's that loss. So then there's the grieving process, not only with grieving the child, but then family and things of that nature. So anything that you can do to really build and nourish more interaction with people, so discussion boards, group messaging, any way you can use social media just to have that element of encouragement. Whenever the times get tough, you can really, if you've got that core unit all together, you can lean on each other a lot more to help each other through some of those more challenging items. Be available. So I'm a firm believer in boundaries. But at the same time, if somebody happens to call and let's say you're asleep, give them a call back. It can be really hard. It can be exhausting at times, but you also want to make sure that you are available whenever you're in the right mindset to be available. Okay. And then after the meeting is done, after the event is done, follow up with people, ask them, how did it go? What suggestions do you have? What could we have done a little bit differently? Was this what you expected it to be? Especially if you've got new volunteers that are on your team, because they could have an idea of what they think something's going to be about. And then let's say they go to an event and it kind of blindsides them a little bit. You don't want for them to no longer be a part of your group. So following up with them and seeking that feedback from them, seeking that information from them can be really, really helpful, really valuable. All right. So to wrap all of this up, this quote I found kind of does a nice job of summarizing everything. So I think all kinds of meanings in life transcend yourself. They're linked to other generations of people around us, to our children and our family. We're passing on something of ourselves to others. I feel that's what makes our life full of meaning. Each and every one of you have gifts and abilities, and you're providing a value to the people around you. And it doesn't matter young or old or where you're at in that spectrum either. To make all of this work, it really does take a village, and it takes people of all different backgrounds, all different ages, all different beliefs. And the fact that you guys come together and make it work on such a regular, consistent basis is really, really awesome. It's really awesome. So, and I have to include references because that's just what I do. So that's pretty much all I wanted to say as far as an overview of all the different generations. I went a little bit faster than I anticipated, but I would love to hear some of y'all's thoughts and see if you've got any comments or any dialogue that we want to have on any of these topics.
Hey, Rachel, there's a couple of questions in the chat. One is, what percentage of the workforce is Gen X? And so maybe follow up to that is maybe like percentages in all of the different generations might be helpful.
Yes. So the traditionalist generation, you're looking at about 2%. The baby boomer generation, about 25%. Generation X, 33%. Millennials, 35%, and Gen Z 5%. Gen Z, a lot of them are still in high school and they're in college right now, so they haven't officially entered the workforce. It is projected though by 2025 that the millennials will outnumber the baby boomers in the work environment. So and, I mean, they're already kind of doing that, but they're going to definitely take over as being the established group in the work environment. What other questions are there? Comments?
Rachel, so I am a child of traditionalists, born from parents who were born in the Depression. So I look at that description, and I'm a Gen X, but I also see many things from the traditionalists that, you know, are instilled in me from my parents. And so as we get further down through the generations, is there an influence, a big influence of our parents' generation in our own? I mean, I know that, you know, these things happened in the world, but I guess what I'm looking for are the values that our parents instilled in us.
So there's a psychologist, his name is Lev Vygotsky, if you want to look him up. He talks a lot about what's called the zone of proximal development. So whenever basically the whole idea was, if you have a child, the zone of proximal development, those individuals that are in the child's life the most when they're going through their developmental years, let's say 5 to about 16 or so that 10-year gap, those individuals have the ability to really shape and impression the child for certain values. So whenever we do all of this, we're not taking into account personality. We're not taking into account potential health or mental health issues that the child may have been born with or is currently dealing with. We're not taking into account if there's any sort of abusive situations that are in the home. So there's a lot of variables that are not accounted for when we look at this. But depending upon the people that are in that child's life when they're going through all of those things, will kind of determine and shape how the child then perceives the world as an adult. So perfect example of that. I'm a millennial, technically, but I was raised Generation X. So my mom was a single parent mom. You know, there would be other people that would pick me up. They would have to tell me the code word that she and I had before I would get in the car. Like it was that thing. But I spent my summers with my grandmother. So having her as a predominant figure in my life, more so than anybody else really, I have a lot of those values from my grandmother, but I was very much raised Gen X, even though I'm technically a millennial. So it is possible to have those multiple bridges in your life.
Rachel, what's your take on, just in the last 2 or 3 years, it seems like things are changing really quickly with, you know, the word woke being used all the time, and the fact that, you know, politics seem to have gotten even more bipolar. You know, what's your take on how that's affecting each of these generations? Because it seems like the younger the generation, the more this is impacting them.
So if you notice, when you look at the different age groups, the ages tend to get smaller and smaller and smaller. And that's because of the advancements of technology. So when we look at the traditionalist group, you've got about a 30-year age gap. But by the time you get to Generation Z, you're only looking at about 10 to 12 years. There's a movie on Netflix, and the name of it escapes me now, but it goes into this whole documentary about how whenever cell phones came out, smartphones came out, that there was an immediate increase in girls that had depression, in suicide rates, and just so many of these negative things for adolescents. And because there is so much misinformation that's out there on the internet, it's very hard to combat that, right? So it's very hard for me to keep my students' attention whenever they're used to a TikTok video where they're on to the next video within 30 seconds.
I think I know which one you're talking about, but it escapes me. And yeah,
Yeah,
it
but
looked
I mean,
both-
even like Snapchat, that's a 30-second thing. Instagram, I don't even have to read anything. It's just a picture and I can keep on scrolling.
Yeah.
In my personal opinion, I think one of the best things that we can do is to encourage encourage the younger generation around us to read actual books, actual articles, don't get all of your information from social media. Don't get your news from Twitter, because there are algorithms in place that are going to force you to only see what they want you to see, because they want you to keep coming back, because that's how they make their money. And I think there's a lot of younger generation that they don't fully understand that part of it. And if you watch that documentary again on Netflix, man, I wish I could remember
Is
the
it the
name of it.
Social Network maybe, or something like
The
that?
Social Dilemma. Yes, thank you,
Yes,
Dan.
that's it. Yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah.
it. That's it. They have things in place, like, so there's a reason why Bill Gates and Steve Jobs would only let their kids play with these devices for 2 hours at a time. And Steve Jobs intentionally set it up so that way, you have a little buzz, or you have a little zoop that happens with your hand. When you do that, there's a chemical release of dopamine and serotonin, which are your happy hormones, that then will encourage you to keep going back to that particular item, that particular device. And so much of this younger generation puts their self-worth in the number of likes that they get, that they don't realize that they are truly valuable and truly special the way that they are. They're too busy comparing themselves to everybody else. And we all know that the number of filters and how many times it took you to edit that, how many times did you have to sit the dog down before you actually got the picture that you wanted? But in the moment, you don't think of that. You see it, and then you compare yourself to it, and it causes a lot of issues. So the more that we can encourage them to really truly go to credible sources, to read books, to read articles, to read on both sides. If you lean hardcore one way, pick up something that's totally different than that. Because it's like I tell my students, you can't argue your point if you don't understand where the other side is coming from.
Yeah.
And I think the more that we can try to do that, the better. But it is an uphill battle. I mean, I see you for 16 weeks. This is in your hand way longer than you're in my class. So.
Thank you. That's yeah, you nailed it.
Mhm. What else? That's it? Y'all are an easy group. Or maybe you're just tired,
I
right?
was to say, it's all those old people on the East Coast.
I've got a
I know
lot
you
of
don't-
light coming at me, so.
Rachel, I know we don't, your timeline ended at 2010. So what's like the next gen's name? Do we know that yet?
We don't know that yet.
Screwed.
We don't know
Best
that
guess.
yet. So some of the research articles that I've read, they're waiting for like the next big defining events before they have that cutoff to say, okay, you're Gen Z, and now here's the next generation that's coming. I hope that those defining events are positive from a social perspective. I don't know though. And they don't really know how big this particular generation is going to be, because like I said, they're waiting for those events to happen.
In the past, when you went through all that, it seemed to be like one big defining event was always like, here, Challenger, Katrina, 9/11. So are those the defining events that you're talking about? Or are there other defining events that, when you said positive, I was wondering where those were?
So the negative tends to stick with us longer from an emotional perspective. So I can remember, watching Full House, and I can remember, the ice cream truck. Like, I can remember all those positive things, but it's called a flashbulb memory. So I go back to my example of 9/11. I remember every single solitary detail of that day, down to the fact that I was also wearing a red shirt with blue jean shorts and black flip-flops, because it was that impactful on my life. The challenge with it from how do you define the next generation is that they see so many things right here in their hands on a regular basis. Like it's gonna have to be something, and I hate to say this, it's gonna have to be detrimental. before that generation is kind of separated from the upcoming generation. And the negative tends to stick with us a lot longer. The negative shapes our personality more so than the positive does. The negative, when somebody feels rejected, the same parts of your brain that are activated if you were to cut your finger while you're, slicing an orange, the same part of your brain is activated when you have physical pain versus when you have emotional pain. And so when we say that our scars tell a story, our physical scars tell a story, but healing from those emotional scars, those tell a story as well. And those are often a lot more impactful than the happy, positive things that happen in our life.
I have a question about sort of the presentation of very polarized thinking or polarized opinions. I don't know, it's my theory that most people are in the middle ground, but it seems like a lot of what's in the media today is polarized from like left or right. And like, is that kind of motivated by social media and marketing and advertising?
So my personal opinion, absolutely. Absolutely. The CNNs and the Fox Newses of the world, they've got to make their money. So they have to have that shock value out there. So that way you read a title, it's got to be what? And then you click on it, because that's how they generate their revenue. Again, this is why I try to tell my students, at least in my class, like, get your news from multiple places, because the media is trying to say that we're divided. The media is trying to say that none of us are going to be on the same page and that we're all at odds against each other. My personal opinion, I don't think that that's true. I think that you have people that typically lean one way or the other, but to say that we're this separated, I don't think that that's true. I think we're more like this, but the media likes to exploit those differences. Me personally, I get my news from BBC, because I figure if they're reporting on it, maybe it's something I need to know about in my own country. And then I try to go to like 3 or 4 different places with differing viewpoints. And then I just kind of piece it together. I'm like, okay, well, this is probably what's going on. But there's actually a study that came out not too long ago where the distrust that the American population has in their mass media, the mass media companies, is at an all-time low. Because you don't really know what to believe. You're showing me a video, but you're leaving out the first 60 seconds of that video that can totally change the context of how I interpret what's going on. So.
Rachel,
Mhm.
your points have been outstanding this evening, and I think they're really helpful for us as leaders. My question is, I have a staff at my camp that ranges in age from 23 to 75. So, and in a week-long camp, they're being thrown into cabins together and having to work together. And in some cases, don't know each other until the minute they walk onto that campus.
Mhm.
Do you have any thoughts for what we could be doing in our, mini staff training that could help them get along better, other than obviously what we're setting as an example, but to throw people into that environment who are coming from across all 5 of these generations potentially, or at least 4 of them. Any quick thoughts on how we can help make that work?
I would say to just keep doing what you're doing. Try to continue to pair people that are polar opposites from one another, because in a way, you're forcing that dialogue to happen. It's very easy for us to gravitate towards people that are similar to us because we like similar. We don't want to have to do a whole lot of challenging things, and it makes us feel better whenever somebody agrees with us. But if I have to do something with somebody that is 30 years older than me, comes from a different walk than I do, has a different religious belief than I do, then it forces me to be a little bit more open-minded and to consider the other side, instead of getting in my comfort zone of what I like and what I'm familiar with. So there's a lot of social psychology experiments and research that's out there that says the best thing that you can do is have people work on a project together. So maybe you have them do some sort of like team building, where they have to solve a puzzle of some sort, or they have something of that nature where they have to work together to solve something. That's how you're gonna have those different individuals come together a lot more cohesively than having them remain independent of each other.
All right, thanks.
Rachel, there's a couple of comments in the chat that you might want to respond to, including one from Jennifer that says it seems that the last 2 years of the pandemic might be a negative milestone event for many people.
Yeah, and if you look at just general workplace behaviors and what organizations are having to do, like for the longest time, the biggest excuse that companies would say is that, oh, people can't work from home, they're not going to stay productive. Well, COVID came along and showed that that was a total lie. So you have now opened Pandora's box, and people have proven, yes, I can work from home and still stay productive. You can't put all of that back. So companies are really having to look at, how do we make flexible working still work? Do people really need to come into the office? How much money can we save from an organizational perspective if we're not leasing out this building that nobody's going to be in? So yeah, I don't think that we're far enough removed from COVID for there to be enough information about the long-term effects of it. But I definitely think that COVID had a major impact. I've got students in my classroom right now that have not been in a classroom since their sophomore year of high school. So if that gives you any kind of idea of what, at least at the college level, what's going on, I definitely think it'll be impactful.
Now, Rachel, do you see this as possibly a wedge that's going to be driven between the generations, because the traditionalists will want to go back to the office and the more modern ones will say, no, we just as productive?
I think if anything, it's kind of brought people together, because I think it's made people be a little bit more empathetic about having to work from home and the challenges associated with that, but then also the freedom and flexibility associated with that too. You know, it's a beautiful thing I mean, I've got my slippers on right now. Like, that's a beautiful thing to be able to do that at home and still be productive and to still communicate, to still have dialogue. I do think that the lack of human interaction is not necessarily a good thing, because there is something about being in the same room with somebody that really enhances a point that you're trying to make. And there's a lot of body language that you miss out on if you only have a camera from like the neck up. And you know, nonverbal communication is what, 70-75% of communication. So if you've got somebody that just has their camera turned off and they're only hearing words, you don't get that same interaction as you would face to face. So companies have got a major thing to navigate, and I'm just, you know, I'm glad I'm not in corporate America anymore. I don't want to have to figure all that out. But yeah.
Thank you.
Same thing for the first moon landing. I was only 8 months old when JFK was shot. Yeah. Yeah. Anybody else?
Thank you. This was wonderful.
I have a question for you, Rachel. Maybe this is too contemporaneous, but in the last 2, 3, 4 years, we've heard all this thing about alternate facts. Okay. Is that considered to be a socially significant thing, or is that just going to blow through and we're not going to worry about it? Because if people are working on alternate facts and alternate realities, to me, that presents an incredible problem.
Do you mean like because they've gotten wrong information?
Yeah. But they're considering 2 sets of facts. I mean, it's the whole story about you can have your own stories, your own beliefs, but you can't have your own facts. But we seem to be gravitating in that direction in some cases.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I think the biggest thing is, I mean, I don't know if I have that answer, but as far as how it impacts you guys, the biggest thing that you guys can do as leaders is just to stay consistent. Have the same message, have the same purpose, reinforce what you're doing, why you're doing it, what your goals are. And eventually, if people do have wrong perceptions or they have altered perceptions, if they see you operating as a consistent leader, some of those altered perceptions will start to subside a little bit, and they'll maybe come back to where they should be.
Well, I think that's always been the magic of camp, is that you can come from all kinds of different backgrounds and political views and ages, et cetera, But the core mission of serving kids with cancer is so strong that very few people ever buck that. And so you really just need to keep coming back to your core mission, and the
Right.
rest kind of works itself out.
Right. And whenever you hear somebody say something like that, that can be the very thing that you fall back on. You know, Dave brings up a good point. Does this have anything to do with helping children? No? Okay, let's move on.
Yep.
So, I just a shameless plug on my part. I do have a leadership Instagram page. So if anybody is interested in that, it's Level the Field Leadership, and I do post content there once a day. I don't get too crazy, but there is a lot of negative stuff that's out there on social media. So if you want to follow that, you'll see just different things from a leadership perspective. I've also got a podcast where I just talk about different leadership principles, and they're only about 15-20 minute segments. Sometimes I interview people about just different leadership styles, and that podcast is Level the Field Leadership. So if you want to go check that out, feel free to do so as well.
Is that listed in your profile?
I don't know. I don't know if I stuck it in there.
Because I actually didn't understand what you said. That I didn't understand the name of your on Instagram podcast.
Here, I'll type it out. If I can type. So that's the name of the podcast. And then that's the Instagram.
Oh, Level the Field. Got it.
Because I believe, you know, if we have more tools to be able to help deal with just different things as they come up, and you never know. I look at kind of like when you go to the grocery store and you go shopping, you know, we listen and we get all of these different ingredients, and then whenever you get home, that's whenever you cook everything. Same thing is true from a leadership perspective. Get all of the different tools and resources that you can, and then when the time is right and you need those, you've got them right there in the pantry, and you can go to them and use them whenever you need them.
Well, thank you so much, Rachel. We really appreciate you being with us tonight. It was such great information that hopefully we can take back to our camps when we work with our volunteers and our staff that can be really helpful. So I encourage you guys all to just like unmute for a second and just clap and hip hip hooray and show Rachel some love and appreciation.
Great job. Thank you.
Thank you guys so much. Now, if you
Wonderful.
haven't
Thank
had
you.
dinner, go eat dinner. You don't want to burn out.
All right.
Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you. Thanks
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Excellent.
Y'all have a good night.
And then there's always those that just stay in the room.
Yeah, and that's fine too.
Rachel, I just wanted to say thank you personally. It's been a pleasure to have you this evening, and I'm the Jennifer COCA Jennifer that you get emails from.
Okay, yeah, it's good to put a face with an email.
Yeah, exactly. And so just wanted to say thank you, and I'll be reaching out to you, so maybe you can provide maybe some more education. We do a lot of educational webinars throughout the year, so I will get in touch with you about that.
I'd love to. Whatever I can do to help you guys, I'm more than happy to do it.
Thank you. Good night, y'all.
Bye.